The world watches with bated breath. Tensions between Russia and the West are higher than they've been in decades. The spectre of war, once unthinkable, now looms large. From Eastern Europe to the Arctic, military exercises and political posturing have become the norm. The global order, already strained by economic uncertainty and climate change, faces its greatest test yet. The stakes couldn't be higher. Are we on the brink of a conflict that could reshape the geopolitical landscape as we know it? The answer, unfortunately, is not a simple one. This essay will delve into the complex dynamics at play, examining the historical roots of the conflict, the factors driving current tensions, and the potential consequences of a full-blown war between NATO and Russia. To understand the present, we must look back. The relationship between Russia and NATO has been fraught since the collapse of the Soviet Union. NATO, formed as a defensive alliance against Soviet expansion, continued to exist even after the Soviet threat receded. This in itself became a point of contention. Russia saw NATO expansion as a betrayal, a broken promise that encroached on its sphere of influence. The West, on the other hand, argued that NATO expansion was about promoting democracy and stability in Europe. Years of mistrust and miscalculations on both sides have created a dangerous chasm. This lack of trust makes communication difficult and raises the risk of misinterpretation, which can quickly escalate tensions. Nowhere are the tensions between Russia and the West more evident than in Ukraine. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and its support for separatists in eastern Ukraine marked a turning point. The West responded with sanctions and condemnation, but the conflict continues to simmer. Ukraine, caught in a geopolitical tug-of-war, has become a pawn in a larger game. Its fate holds significant implications for the future of Europe and the global order. A Russian invasion of Ukraine would shatter any pretense of peace and stability in the region. It would be a blatant violation of international law and could trigger a wider conflict. The world watches anxiously, hoping for a diplomatic solution but bracing for the worst. At the heart of the tensions lie fundamental differences in worldview and security interests. Russia, under Vladimir Putin, seeks to reclaim its status as a great power and reassert its influence in its near abroad. It views NATO expansion as a direct threat to its security and a violation of agreements made after the Cold War. The West, on the other hand, sees Russia's actions as aggressive and destabilizing. It fears that Russia's ambitions extend beyond Ukraine and threaten the security of NATO members in Eastern Europe. These conflicting narratives, fueled by historical grievances and mistrust, make finding common ground incredibly difficult. The lack of transparency and open dialogue only exacerbates the situation, increasing the risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation. Section 5. The nuclear shadow. Why a full-scale war is unlikely. Despite the alarming rhetoric and military build-up, a full-scale war between NATO and Russia remains unlikely. The reason is simple but terrifying: nuclear weapons. Both sides possess arsenals capable of unimaginable destruction. The use of even a single nuclear weapon would have catastrophic consequences, not just for the belligerents but for the entire world. This shared threat serves as the ultimate deterrent. Rational actors, even when driven by ideology or ambition, are unlikely to risk their own annihilation. However, it's important to remember that even with this deterrent in place, the risk of miscalculation or accidents remains a real and present danger. Section 6. The unthinkable consequences of a NATO-Russia war. While a full-scale nuclear war is unlikely, even a conventional conflict between NATO and Russia would be devastating. The human cost would be immeasurable. Millions of lives would be at risk and entire cities could be reduced to rubble. The economic consequences would be equally severe. Global trade would be disrupted, supply chains would collapse, and the world could be plunged into a deep recession. Moreover, a war between these nuclear-armed powers could easily escalate, potentially leading to the use of nuclear weapons either intentionally or accidentally. The consequences of such an event are too horrific to contemplate. Section 7. Preventing Armageddon diplomacy is the only option. Given the potentially catastrophic consequences of a conflict, diplomacy is not just the preferred option, it's the only option. Both sides must engage in dialogue, however difficult or uncomfortable it may be. They need to address each other's security concerns, find areas of common ground, and rebuild trust. This will require compromise and a willingness to see beyond the entrenched narratives of the past. The international community also has a crucial role to play. Organizations like the United Nations and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, or OSCE, can facilitate dialogue and help to de-escalate tensions. Section 8. The future of global security. Is there a way forward? The current tensions between NATO and Russia are a symptom of a larger problem: the erosion of the rules-based international order that has underpinned global security since the end of World War II. The rise of nationalism, populism, and great power competition has created an environment where dialogue is difficult and compromise is seen as weakness. To prevent future conflicts, we need to strengthen international institutions, promote multilateralism, and reaffirm our commitment to diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolution. This requires global leadership, cooperation, and a shared understanding that in an interconnected world, security is indivisible. Section 9. Conclusion. A time for reflection and action. The world stands at a crossroads. The path we choose will have profound consequences for generations to come. We can choose the path of confrontation and conflict, a path that leads to destruction and despair, or we can choose the path of diplomacy and dialogue, a path that offers the hope of peace and prosperity. The choice is ours to make. Let us choose wisely.